Hello and welcome to NexTalks. I'm Nex, and this is where I talk. Today I'm talking about something way off the beaten path of what we've talked about so far, and to be completely honest with you, I'm a little nervous. This is out of my comfort zone, which I truly believe is where the magic happens. I think that getting out of your comfort zone is so important for your growth and for me to practice what I preach and to challenge you to get out of your comfort zone. I have to do the same. I have to walk the talk. I have to practice what I preach. And that's what I'm doing with you today. Today's episode is about spirituality. And to be straight up with you, I'm actually kind of scared. I have a lot of discomfort around this subject. And this episode is going to be a lot less about practical, useful tips to help improve your life and more about me just sharing where I'm at in my journey with all of these things and a lot of stories from my past and a lot of my history around this subject. And hopefully that's going to be helpful to someone out there who can relate to some of my history, some of my stories, and maybe where I'm at today. So let's get into it. I want to start with my history. So I was raised in the Christian church. My earliest memories are of a Methodist church. And I remember something very specific, and I don't know exactly how old I was, but I was rather young, and I was having a sleepover with my best friend. Now, my mom and her mom are best friends. They have been since college, so we basically grew up together. We were only 10 months apart. And I remember I was sleeping over at her house. She and I were in her bed, and we were laying opposite each other. So her feet were where my head was. And I don't know why this is relevant, but I remember it pretty well. And she had a bunk bed, but it was just the top bunk with no bottom part. Anyway, that's not relevant. So we're laying there, supposed to be asleep, probably just kind of talking as we go to bed. And I don't know how this came up. I don't know if I was praying or I don't know what we were talking about, but she told me that she didn't believe in God. And that shocked me. I had never heard of that idea in my life. I didn't know that was an option. And I was so sad. I remember I cried. I'm pretty sure that I cried myself to sleep after that. And I can only imagine how awkward and uncomfortable that must have been for her to express something that she thought or felt, and for me to just be completely destroyed by it. I don't know if she remembers this, but I remember that pretty vividly. So faith for me and believing in God was huge. I was fully sold on it. That didn't shake my faith at all. I just remember feeling so bad for her for not realizing the truth or what I thought was the truth at that point in my life. And she was younger than me by almost a year. I want to say that we were elementary school age. I think maybe 6 years old. She might have been 5. Maybe I was 7 or 8. She was 6 or 7. But that's one of my earliest memories around spirituality. And even now as I talk about it, I'm filled with emotion. I feel like I could cry. It's almost like I'm back there in that space. And it's just amazing how many emotions are attached to this subject and how little time we spend talking about this and learning about it and sharing experiences with each other around it, especially people like myself. I'm the most guilty of this. I'd like to talk about things that are 100% provable through science, techniques that work, practical tools in the here and now, in the present world, in the material world. And I don't know if that's from being an American or if that's from my journey through some of these things and my aversion to anything spiritual or religious because of the negative experiences I had down the road. So let's get into some of that now. And to get there, we kind of have to build from that foundation of really strong faith as a young child, which really came probably mostly from my mom. So I was raised by a single mother who credits Christianity to dramatically transforming and improving her life long before I was born. She still to this day is a very devout Christian. So I remember the Methodist church as a young child, and I remember being really into it. I remember putting my hands up during the worship, singing the songs loudly. I don't really remember disliking church. The only memories I really have of not wanting to go to church were more in my teenage years or preteen years even, where I just wanted to sleep in. You know, we get so sleep deprived as adolescents, and church is in the morning on Sundays, which is one of 2 days each week that we could actually sleep in. So I just wanted to sleep. It wasn't so much that I disliked church. It wasn't like I found it boring. I just wanted to be able to sleep. But I do remember going to Sunday school, being just really, really actively involved, just like my mom was. She was involved in Bible studies. She volunteered with the church. One of her jobs for most of my teenage life was actually in a Christian organization, which had its ups and downs. I'm no longer a Christian, and we'll get to why that is. But even as I'm talking about it, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I was surrounded by so much indoctrination. I mean, my mom was my only parent and virtually my only influence in that role. And she was so into it. She was 100% living her life for Jesus. And how could I not? How could I not buy into that? Because there is so much good stuff that comes from Christianity, and even probably most organized religion. There's this great community of people who want to do good. They want to do charity. They want to help each other out. They want to connect and learn about ways to please God, who they believe is, the most important thing on earth, and their creator, and they owe their life to them. So therefore they should do everything they can to learn and grow in that life and to connect with like-minded people. We sang, we danced, there was so much joy, there was so much smiling, there was so much connection. I remember we used to hug everyone. We were really just so deeply ingrained in that church community. I really liked that. Some of my friends were at church. I loved youth group and different types of, we would go on camping trips and all sorts of fun things with our youth group, and it was so fun. I had so many fun, great experiences. And when I was, I think, around 15, the therapist that really healed my relationship with my mom and really was a huge, I could probably credit this guy to being part of the reason I'm still alive today, and really helped me manage my depression and low self-esteem. And so much of what I was dealing with as a teenager was actually someone that my mom knew from working in the Christian organization. So I never would have met him, or the chances of me meeting him would have been dramatically reduced. And who knows what kind of experience I would have had if not for that person. And as difficult as it is to say as a science-minded person, I also have to give credit to God or spirit or the universe or whatever you want to call it for my being alive today too. And I'm not talking big picture, like if there is a creator or something greater that's playing some role in us being here in the first place, and maybe even having some kind of impact on our daily lives, listening to our prayers, etc. I'm talking about specific experiences when I was a teenager where I wanted to end my own life, and unexplainable or very, very, very unusual, unexpected things happened that caused me to believe that God was there with me, listening to my prayers, cared about me enough to prevent me from ending my own life. And I don't talk about it a lot because I know it can sound a little far-fetched, a little crazy. I don't necessarily know what it means or what the takeaway is from it. I just know that in those moments, I chose not to end my own life because of it, and I felt confirmation from God that He existed. Do I still think God is a He? No. Do I even call it God? No. I think there's so much that happened. There's still so much to cover here, that anything that feels like Christianity to me, I have such an aversion to it. And I'm just now, at 32 years old, starting to try to soften that and be a little bit more open-minded and open to maybe something more. but it's hard. And I can hear myself, that my tone of my voice, I sound kind of sad. I mean, it's just very heavy. This whole subject is super heavy. So I appreciate you for listening to this. And if it's too much for you, I get it. You certainly can just skip this episode. I'm sure I'll be back to, practical ways to improve your life next week. But for now, I felt that this was important to share. And my theme for this year is use your voice. So that's what I'm trying to do here today. And I don't know about you, but I'm already crying, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet. So obviously there's still so much that I'm working out around this. So whatever I say in this episode, take it with a grain of salt. I don't know. I am the last person that you should ask for advice on spirituality. I have no clue. I just know about the experiences that I've had, and I want to share them with you. So I'm an agnostic, which basically just means I don't know. And that's my happy place with all of this stuff. I don't know. I'm going to tell you about what happened to me, and I don't know. That's about the best I can give you. So if you're thinking at the end, I'm going to be like, yeah, so you should go do this and that. Don't wait for that, because I do whatever you think is best, because it has been a wild ride for me, and I'm sure it has been for you too. And I would love to hear from any of you. Let me know what your experiences have been like, and if you've had any of these quote unquote coincidences, or as I think my mom is where I got this from. I don't remember who used to say this. They call them God incidences. If you've had any of these similar kinds of experiences, please do share them with me if you're comfortable doing so, because it helps to know that I'm not the only one, and it makes me feel a little less crazy. I don't like that word. It's just nice to know that you're not alone, no matter what it is that you're going through. All right, we're going to keep a running tally. That's cry number 2 that I've had on this podcast. Remind me not to do heavily emotional subjects when I'm in PMS week, because this is crazy. Okay, so let's get into my first story. I don't remember the order of these, so I'm just going to share one and then the other. They were pretty close together, I would say definitely within a couple years of each other. All throughout this time, I was struggling with very low self-esteem, wanting to kill myself, feeling like the world, my mom, just feeling like everyone would be better off without me, and that people wouldn't really miss me for long, and ultimately their lives and the world in general would be improved without my emo, depressed self kind of wandering around, bringing people down, feeling misunderstood, feeling like I couldn't connect with people. There were no like minds like me, feeling like I always made people uncomfortable. I was always asking why too much. I was always challenging the conventional ways that people lived and believed. Always asking my teachers, why do we need to learn this? I just felt like kind of a thorn in the side of the world. And reflecting on that now is making me cry. It's so sad to think that I was feeling that way at such a young age, but that's how I felt. So, and I would cut myself as well to try to make sense of the pain that I was feeling emotionally and psychologically that was ultimately, puberty and adolescence in general, and just not having a really great support system for these things. Okay, so story number 1. Both of these stories are stories where I made ultimatums with God, where I said, God, if you're real, you have to prove that you are real, or I'm done. I'm ending my own life. Because if you're not real, and you're not listening, and you don't care, and you're not willing to give me a sign, it's not worth living. And in both instances, they did. So the first, I was laying in bed, going to sleep one night, and I was listening to the radio, and it was some rock station. And I said, okay, God, if you're real, then the next song that plays on the radio will be either this song or this song. 2 songs that I very much liked and were very emo and were also very popular at the time. And the chances of either one of those songs coming on a mainstream rock radio station were probably actually pretty high. So if either of those songs had played, I know in that moment, I probably would have taken it as the sign that I needed. But what happened instead, I found even more profound. So it ended up being a Creed song. I want to say With Arms Wide Open, but I don't really remember if that was it. I just know it was definitely Creed. And I was listening to it going, okay, well, I guess God's not real. He doesn't care. I'm just going to end my life. I realize this is dramatic, but I was like a 13-year-old girl or something, and I was looking for any excuse. Then, after the song was over, the DJ comes on, and he goes, "There's a little Christian rock for you. I have no idea why I just played that." I felt so... I don't know if uncomfortable is the right word, but I was like, what? Whoa. It was like all of a sudden, it just felt like God was like, yeah, what now? Your move. It just felt to me like so solid. It was just like this feeling came over me of like, that was very strange. Sure, it could have just been a weird coincidence. But it blew my little teenage mind, and it still blows my mind to this day. I still find that to be a pretty hard coincidence to explain, that the DJ himself would say, not only refer to it as Christian rock, because Creed is still, back then it was pretty popular. It could have been on the radio anytime. I don't know if that station played it a lot, but for him to go so far as to call it Christian rock and then say, I have no idea why I just played that. It just gave me the shivers. It was like, okay, I hear you. I won't kill myself. We're good. You're real. I get it. Okay. And the word I'm looking for is, I felt God's presence. It felt like God was present in that room with me in that moment, like just filled the room. And I was in awe. I just lay there in the dark, just like, whoa. Completely humbled, but also extremely comforted. Like, all right, well, I don't know exactly what that means, but obviously someone's out there listening to me and wants to show me a sign, which I don't know that I deserve. I don't want anyone out there to be like, oh, well, I asked for a sign and I didn't get one, so why do you get one? I don't know why. I don't know. I'm grateful that I did, though. That's for sure. So that's story number 1. Story number 2 is similar in the sense that it was an ultimatum, but this time it had to come from someone else. So I made a deal with God, and at this point I probably shouldn't have been doing this anymore, right? Because I already believed that he existed, but I still really didn't want to keep going. I didn't want to keep living. So I think I got this idea actually from some news story or something I read online. I don't even know where the idea came from, but I decided that if no one complimented me the next day, then I would end my life the following day or whenever I got the opportunity. So I'm pretty depressed and down that next day, as you can imagine. I'm not really reeling in compliments. I'm not really giving off top tier performance or energy or smiles. I'm not really in a state to be receiving tons of compliments. So I go the whole day. I don't remember if I had school that day. I assume I did. I don't really remember anything from the daytime. I just know that night I went to this kind of like a youth group kind of thing with my mom. It was a place where teens could hang out, and there was like different kinds of games and movies and all this stuff. It was like supposed to be a safe place for teens to hang out so that they weren't out partying and drinking and all this stuff. So I was too young to be there, I think. I think it was just high school kids. I think I was in middle school at the time. So I must have been like 13 years old. And at this point, the day's almost over. No one has complimented me. I'm like some young kid with a bunch of older kids. They don't want to hang out with me. They don't want to, no one's complimenting me. Like I'm pretty sure I had braces, and I'm just not, I don't think I was getting a ton of compliments in general, and certainly not in this environment. So I do remember there was one of the youth leader guys there who kind of asked me, like, are you okay? I think he could sense that something pretty heavy was on my mind, but how could he have known? And he didn't compliment me, so it didn't matter to me that an adult seemed to care, which now it's like, that is so important, and that should have like given me a lot of pep in my step, but I just wanted a compliment. I can't really explain what these ultimatums were driven by, and I don't really care if you judge my old self for them. These are my stories. This is what happened. This is what was going through my head. So the end of the night comes, the place is closing, people's parents are picking them up, they're all leaving, there's barely anyone left. And there was one guy there who I'd never seen there before or after, and we used to go there a lot because my mom volunteered there. And I'd never seen him before or after this, but he had been being really funny. He was playing some video game, and he just was making me laugh a lot. I remember I had been laughing a lot at stuff he was saying throughout the night. And he left, and then, so he left. He went out the door, and then he came back in. I remember I was sitting on the pool table, just kind of chilling, waiting for my mom to be done so we could leave, and contemplating the fact that I'm going to have to end my life now because this is pretty much it. I mean, maybe I'll talk to some friends before I go to bed, like on the phone or something, but I mean, here we are. So he leaves. Then he comes back in. I remember this so clearly. He comes back in the door, comes straight up to me, and goes, "Hey, I just have to tell you, you have the best laugh I've ever heard." He leaves. It's like no big deal. A very similar energy where it's kind of like people just felt like they just had to do something. They didn't know why. And even the way they said it, like the DJ was like, "I don't know why I just played that. I hope you liked it." Just kind of like, whatever. I just did it. It felt random. And he doesn't know that was like a sign from God to me. And that's how I felt about it. He just thought, I don't know why. I just did it. Whatever. Probably didn't think twice about it. Same thing with this kid. I've never seen him since. I never saw him before that. I don't know who that kid was. But the way he worded it even was like, "I just have to tell you, you have the best laugh I've ever heard." And I was like, this is a teenage boy. Like, how often are teenage boys just randomly dishing out compliments to strangers? It was just so strange. I was really, again, I had that same kind of feeling. I remember this time it was lighter. I felt really happy. I felt really grateful. I was like, oh, someone likes my laugh. And I think part of that is because words of affirmation is my love language. I don't know, it gave me some kind of value. I think a lot of my struggles in my teenage years came from stereotypical daddy issues. My dad wasn't present in my life. I didn't actually meet my dad until I was 19 years old. So all of this time, I had pretty unhealthy relationships with boys. I cared a lot about what boys thought of me. So this boy who was like making me laugh all night, who's saying I have a great laugh, it meant the world to me. It was like way better than any compliment. If my mom was like, "Oh, your hair looks nice," I probably still would have counted that as, okay, I got a compliment. We're good. But this was everything. And it was so random. And it was this random person. Like, I just still don't know who this person was. Was it even a person? Was it some angel? Who knows? Who's to say? But that's story number 2. And as I think back, I think I was actually like 12 years old at that point. I think you were supposed to be a teenager, and I think I was 12 and in middle school at that point, which is, I'm having an aha moment because I've been saying that I was depressed and cutting myself and wanting to end my life from the ages of 13 to 19, but now I'm realizing that it was at least 12. And it's just kind of wild to think of how young I could have possibly been. Now I'm kind of questioning everything, but here we are. So my relationship with God continued. I was saved, so we started going to non-denominational churches. We started going to a lot of Christian youth conferences and things. My mom was really actively involved in these things, and I was attending right alongside her. And I was getting saved and asking Jesus Christ to be my Lord and Savior and, committing my life to him and committing to purity and abstinence and saving myself till marriage. And there's a lot that can be said about that. I think the idea of, going through puberty, feeling sexual urges and desires and sensations and not feeling like that was okay, feeling like that was sinful, and never really having any kind of talk with my mom about any of these things. All of the education I got came from, I think, one class we had in 5th grade when I was 10 years old about what was going to happen when we got our period and how babies are made, and maybe something about STDs. I know we talked about STDs and some of these things a little bit in health class in high school, which was like 1 year. I think it was like an every other day class. It was, my education was limited. And then anything else I learned was from the internet. And that's probably not the greatest place for girls to learn about what sex is like, from things like pornography, but that's the hand I was dealt, and I bet a lot of people can relate to that. But I'm not really trying to talk about that today, although I do think that'll make a really good podcast topic sometime in the future. But sticking on the subject of spirituality, I really started to develop my own personal relationship with God. Even after I moved out from my mom's house, I continued to attend church, mostly virtually. It was easier that way for me. I had moved out of town. I really liked my home church. I still volunteered. I volunteered with the young kids. I volunteered with the youth group. I went to a small group, which is like a Bible study. I was super devoted and involved in the church. So fast forward until I'm about, I think, 22 or so. At this point, I had met a guy who was not a Christian, and I told him that I wouldn't be able to marry him or sleep with him unless he became a Christian. And I basically pressured him into that. I mean, I didn't directly pressure him, but we were in love, and obviously he wanted to sleep with me, and we did end up getting married, and he was agnostic. I don't think he really cared too much about praying to Jesus to invite him into his heart and say he was saved. He did what he had to do, basically. And that was like music to my ears. I was so happy when he told me that he prayed the prayer. I think we got jiggy immediately. Did I say got jiggy? Okay, I don't know. I don't know how much I'm able to say on here. I put these on my YouTube. I already feel like I've said things that might get this episode flagged or censored or something. So I don't know. You get it, right? We did the deed, okay? In the biblical sense. Okay, so we're together for a few years. We're engaged and we're living together. And it's about, I think it was like a month or a couple of months before we were due to be married. And my youth pastor, so at this point I'm serving alongside the youth pastor, right? I'm like a youth leader. And the youth pastor, I don't remember all the details, but I know he like took me into his office. He was very serious. And he was like, "Are you living with your fiance?" And I was like, "Yeah." And the implication was, "Are you sleeping with your fiance?" Right? Which he didn't ask directly. He just asked if I was living with him. And I said, "Yeah. Our wedding's in a few months." And he was like, "Oh no, that's not okay. That's really bad. That's awful." It was like the cardinal sin had been broken. Now, I was giving 10% of my income to this church. I was attending at least one service every weekend. I was serving in the children's ministry. I was serving actively in the youth ministry. Not only was I serving in the youth ministry, but I was even meeting with a lot of these girls, because the group that I worked with, the small group within the youth group that I worked with, was a group of, I guess you could say, like inner city teens. I think some of them were like 12 and 13. I think it was like ages 12 to 14. And I would meet with them outside of church. I would take them to Applebee's and I would check in with them all the time. We would have phone calls. They would text me. Like, I was an amazing support system for them. I know that I had a positive impact on their lives. And on the lives of their parents, I was able to kind of give them a little break sometimes, and we all had good relationships. I was doing good things. I don't feel like I need to justify that. I can't imagine any good reason why someone would want to end that. But he did. So we were due to go on a missions trip that summer. He ended up canceling the missions trip completely, I think because of this. It's wild. I mean, the whole youth group, this was a church of over 2,000 members who would come. And this is like one of those non-denominational mega churches. I mean, this is real life. This isn't a movie. Like, this happened to me. I got to see the man behind the curtain, and it was not a wizard. It was creepy. So not only did he like admonish me in his office and basically tell me that this was non-negotiable and I would have to move out from living with my fiance, or I would be at danger of like losing my membership in the church. I wouldn't be able to help and volunteer anymore and all this stuff. And I was just blown away. I could not believe that this was happening. And I could tell that this was ridiculous. This was absolutely ridiculous. And I wasn't going to move out from my fiance's house. This is silly. This can't really be happening, right? Why is this happening? Then I learned that there is nothing about premarital sex in the Bible at all. They do refer to sexual immorality. These sexually immoral things are outlined in the Old Testament. Things like adultery, like cheating. I think I used to know all of them off the top of my head, especially right after this happened. Things like incest, things like homosexuality, which I also think is absurd. And I think probably many of you listening to this think is one of those absurd things that they have in the Christian churches. And some of them are more open to that type of thing, but they probably still push premarital sex, which is absurd because there is nothing about premarital sex in the Bible, and there is a lot about homosexuality not being okay. I can feel myself getting activated by this because I was done a deep injustice, and so were these girls that I was helping. So not only did he remove my ability to volunteer in the youth group any further, he went to the head pastor of the church, basically tattled on me for this horrible sin that's not even in the Bible, which I challenged him on. And I was having people come up to me when I was at church. I had people come up to me so concerned. Oh my God, Pastor, I won't say his name, but, Pastor so-and-so said that this was going on. I really can't believe this. I mean, I hope that you would turn back to God, and I hope that you would, see your sins and change what you're doing. It was crazy. I could not believe that people who I thought were my friends, my, kind of like colleagues, I'm like, what are you guys talking about? I'm like, what can you show me what verse it says that this is not okay, what I'm doing? Can anyone show me? Not a single person. Not a single person. They'd be like, oh, I know it's in there, so I'll get back to you as soon as I find it. And did they ever get back to me? No. Did anyone ever prove anything to me about this? No. And I started to realize, holy crap, 22 years of my life I have devoted to what appears to be kind of a weird scam that just wants to shame women and shame sexuality and shame sex, I guess. I mean, what the heck is going on here? I still have no idea. I think I'm still 10 years later, still kind of processing what the heck happened here. And not only this, but he went so far as to individually contact the parents of all the girls that I worked with to warn them not to allow me to have any impact or influence in their lives because I was such a bad influence. One of the girls was pregnant at 16. I would say at least half of them, if not, I would say there was at least maybe one or two who I'm pretty certain had never had sexual contact with anyone, at least not actual sexual intercourse. But these girls, I told you, they were 12 to 14 years old. I mean, most of them had sex, and not because of my influence. Long before I ever met them, some against their will. I mean, this man was so... It's, if you've actually read any of the Bible, this is the kind of crap that Jesus hated. And it's just so tragic that this is what happened. I mean, it all started to unravel, and I started to realize, okay, wait a second. My whole life, not my whole life entirely, but all this part of my life, which was, as you can hear, I mean, I was giving so many hours and resources and so much time and energy, including money, to this cause, to this religion. And then it all just kind of collapsed underneath me, and it was life-changing. And I became an agnostic almost overnight, where I just was like, well, I have those experiences that made me think that someone is probably listening to my prayers, and it seems like something. I mean, I had these weird coincidences that felt like signs from God to me, and I just don't know what that means. And strangely enough, I didn't really explore anything else. I think I felt so burned and so embarrassed and so ashamed. I was an evangelical Christian. I used to try to convert people to Christianity and help them see the light. And, I from such a young age, I was crying for people who didn't believe in God. I felt so bad. I mean, I really believed people were going to burn in hell. Like, it's just, I couldn't believe. I mean, I can't believe now that I believed all of that then and kind of talked to people the way that I did. And I wasn't mean to anyone, but I felt this pressure on me to convince them that they had to accept Jesus or they would suffer. And I didn't want them to suffer because I loved them, even people I didn't know. I remember I once converted some lady who, I don't even remember what this was for. I think I had gotten a speeding ticket or something, and I was at a court, and she was at court too, and me and her started talking, and by the end we had exchanged contact information. We were like reading the Bible together. I mean, that was such a huge part of my life. And I felt so ashamed and so embarrassed that I had done anything to help perpetuate the BS that is the Christian church and Christian religion. And I would say modern day, but even if you really do look at the Bible, the way they demonize homosexuality, the way that there's a line, I could look it up, right? This is a podcast, but just off the top of my head, it's Exodus, I don't know, something. And it says that God said through Moses that you can beat your slave to the point that they become unconscious. As long as they get up within 2 days, then you have committed no sin because that man is your property. You mean to tell me God said that? I'm going to call BS on that. And this is Moses, who apparently wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, and Jesus references as a pretty great guy all throughout the New Testament. So yeah, there's some great messages in there. Anti-hypocrisy, that's awesome. Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. That is great. I love that. I will take that. Treat others like you want to be treated. Beautiful. Yes, I give that 5 stars. Before you take the speck out of your brother's eye, first work to remove the log from your own. I love that. These are all things that Jesus apparently said. Great. So there's good stuff in there. I get it. Like I said, there's good stuff about churches. It creates a safe community, a place where people can find support. I think it's a good crutch for a lot of people. But unfortunately, the man behind the curtain is not who we think he is. It's not God. It's not Jesus. It's not whatever perception you have of these things. It's all about power. It's all about control. It's all about suppression, repression, manipulation. I mean, I think probably a lot of organized religion, a lot of the leaders, unfortunately, power corrupts. So just be mindful of that in whatever you're currently practicing, and do whatever's best for you. I'm not here to tell you what's right or what's wrong. Although I will say that what that guy did was pretty wrong, and what I was doing was very good intentioned. So I went into this kind of anti-Christianity and anti-religion and probably just anti-God, anti-spirituality, I guess you could call it, phase for about the last 10 years of my life. I got really into just science, reason, logic, objectivism, the material world. And that served me very well for the last 10 years, and it still seems to be serving me quite well. However, I've been reflecting more lately. Some new people have come into my life and challenged me to think a little bit differently, and I've been forced to think about some of those experiences that I had when I was younger. And actually, at the new year, I had an experience that caused me to pray. Just a few days after the new year in 2023 when I'm recording this. And I was praying to God. I was sitting on the beach and I was praying, and I was like, who am I praying to? What am I doing? Why am I praying? And I've prayed a few times since then, usually if I'm in trouble. And that was this instance. But I just started to really push into that and be like, okay, what is this? What am I doing? Who am I praying to? Is there really something out there? Is there something greater? If I look at those past experiences that I had, I would have to say yes. I would be really hard pressed to say that those were just random coincidences that happened at the perfect moment and I'm just super lucky. Now, I'm a lucky chick, but that feels a little supernatural to me. Do I know what it is? No. Do I know what to call it? No. Does it speak clearly to me and give me clear messages and direction? No. But I am trying to be more open-minded. I'm trying to be more sensitive, and I'm trying to kind of tap into if I feel like I should say something or if I feel like I should do something, kind of go with it. Just kind of think, just allow myself to think, okay, spirit or the universe or God, or whatever you want to call it, goddess, is kind of pressing on me right now to do this, so I should do it. Or to say this, so I should say it. I can't see how that could hurt. If you just think it's intuition, then okay, I'm going to be listening to my intuition a little bit more. I'm shifting my energy. I'm trying to become softer, more receptive, more open, less intense, less sure of myself, open to learning more, open to not having all the answers, not knowing, and just leaning even more into I don't know. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I know it's kind of a longer one compared to some of the others. I hope you enjoyed hearing some of my stories and a little update as to where I'm at, because I have been creating content now for over 6 years, and I've shared a little bit about my journey in the past, but I haven't talked too much about being more open and more receptive this last month or so. So I wanted to share this with you guys and kind of get some feedback. So I hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider supporting at the website nexjuice.com, NexJuice.com. Go to the support page. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of NexTalks. I'm Nex. I talked. I hope you liked it. I also cried a little. I don't know if I hope you liked that, but hey, at least I have feelings. Sometimes it's hard to tell if I have feelings or not. We're working on it, okay? Anyway, I hope that I see you soon. If there's anything else you'd like to hear me talk about, please let me know. If there's anything you want to add to this conversation or share with me or with the community, please feel free to do so. You can leave it in the comments or you can message me on social media. Thank you so much again.